The Haunted Mansions of Old Hollywood. These are the four most infamous haunted mansions of Old Hollywood, homes where silent film stars and Golden Age legends lived, died, and according to countless witnesses, refused to leave. From the demolished Pickfair estate to Rudolph Valentino's Falcon Lair, these mansions reveal how Hollywood's greatest stars became its most persistent ghosts. Pickfair, America's sweetheart's eternal home. Douglas Fairbanks bought a hunting lodge in Beverly Hills in 1919 and turned it into what Life magazine called a gathering place only slightly less important than the White House and much more fun. He built it for Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart, working with architect Wallace Neff to create a Tudor-style mansion spanning 18 acres with somewhere between 22 and 25 rooms. Those renovations ran him $175,000, and they named the estate Pickfair. What they created wasn't just another Hollywood home. It was the center of the entertainment universe. Charlie Chaplin showed up to parties there, and so did Albert Einstein, F. Scott Fitzgerald, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, Amelia Earhart, Helen Keller, and Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. Will Rogers joked in 1928 that his most important job as mayor of Beverly Hills was giving people directions to Mary Pickford's house. But even during those glamorous years in the 20s and 30s, Pickford and Fairbanks told friends they'd spotted the spirit of a female servant wandering the property. Nobody could tell if they meant it or if this was just another bit of Hollywood showmanship. The marriage ended in 1936. Mary kept the estate, and life went on until 1976, when she received an honorary Academy Award at age 83 for her contribution to American film. They held the ceremony right there in Pickfair's living room and televised it during the 48th Academy Awards. 3 years later, Mary Pickford died, and that's when things got stranger. Buddy Rogers, her second husband, claimed Mary's ghost appeared to him dressed in a white gown, urging him to sell the property. Whether he believed it or just wanted out, he sold in 1980 to Lakers owner Jerry Buss, who then sold it to actress Pia Zadora and her husband in 1988. And that's when the haunting kicked into overdrive. Zadora's daughter woke up to see a ghostly woman laughing above her bed. The family heard women laughing throughout the house. Sounds they believed came from the ghosts of Fairbanks' mistresses who died there. Parties from decades past echoed through the hallways at night. When her husband traveled, Pia saw a white apparition drifting through rooms. A male spirit appeared near the entrance. Another one carried sheet music. Pia Zadora demolished Pickfair in 1990, initially blaming termites and structural damage. But 22 years later, on Celebrity Ghost Stories in 2012, she admitted the real reason. "If I had a choice, I never would have torn down this old home. I loved this home. It had a history. It had a very important sense about it, and you can deal with termites and you can deal with plumbing issues, but you can't deal with the supernatural." Douglas Fairbanks Jr. went public with his regret over selling his parents' home. Between 1990 and 1994, Zadora built a replacement on the site, a 26,000 square foot Venetian palazzo with more than 50 rooms, which sold for $15 million in 2005. Hollywood's White House was gone, but the question lingers. When they tore down Pickfair, did the ghosts leave with it? Falcon Lair, where Valentino never left. Rudolph Valentino bought his Spanish colonial revival mansion in 1925 at the absolute peak of his fame, paying $175,000 for the Wallace Neff-designed estate in Benedict Canyon, which works out to roughly $3 million in today's money. He named it Falcon Lair after an unproduced film he'd been planning called The Hooded Falcon. And the place sat on 4 acres that later expanded to include another 6.5 acres for his horses. Valentino packed the house with European and Middle Eastern antiques and turned it into one of the first California homes built entirely with electric lights, earning it the nickname the Hollywood Electrical Home. But his time there was cut brutally short when he divorced Natasha Rambova before 1926, and then collapsed in New York on August 15th of that year during emergency surgery for a perforated ulcer. 8 days later, on August 23rd, Valentino died of peritonitis at 31 years old. What happened next shocked even Hollywood. Over 100,000 people showed up to his viewing and funeral in New York City, breaking windows at the funeral home as mass hysteria and riots broke out among fans. They held a second funeral in Hollywood, and to settle Valentino's debts, Falcon Lair went to auction, where diamond broker Jules Howard picked it up for $145,000. The hauntings started almost immediately. The estate's caretaker happened to be a spiritualist who held seances and claimed Valentino's spirit showed up dressed in his famous chic costume. But here's the thing. The whole setup was rigged. The caretaker had wired electrical connections throughout the house to flash pale blue and green lights through the rooms. And neighbors reported seeing eerie lights and ghost-like figures they assumed were supernatural. Western star Harry Carey rented the main house in 1930 and later said, "Our first night in Falcon Lair was one to turn your hair gray." Carey exposed the fraud when he found the banging windows and electrical terminals, but even after discovering the tricks, he admitted, "Sometimes I wake up and hear new noises. Maybe the place is haunted." The mansion changed hands constantly through the 40s. Actress Anne Harding bought it for $75,000 and flipped it 5 months later for $125,000. Socialite Millicent Rogers owned it briefly before reportedly fleeing after just one night, chased out by Valentino's ghost. They held another seance there in 1948 on what would have been the 53rd anniversary of Valentino's birth. Tobacco heiress Doris Duke picked up the property in the early 50s and held onto it until her death in 1993 under circumstances that spawned rumors her butler had killed her with morphine. The butler died in 1996, the estate sold in 1998, and in 2006, someone bulldozed the historic main building. By 2018, the remainder of the original estate carried a price tag of $29.5 million. But through all those years and all those owners, the reports never stopped. People saw Valentino's ghostly figure wandering the halls, the bedrooms, the stables, standing at the second-story window watching Los Angeles spread out below. His dog Kabar howled at night. Phantom horses appeared in the darkness. The main house is gone now. Only the stable building and garage survive. But people still claim you can see Rudolph Valentino looking out over the city he conquered but never got to grow old in. The Houdini Mansion, Hollywood's favorite lie. A property at 2400 Laurel Canyon Boulevard goes by the name Houdini Mansion, except for one small problem. Harry Houdini never owned it and never even lived there. This ranks as one of Hollywood's most stubborn urban legends. Department store magnate Ralph M. Walker built the Mediterranean-style villa in 1915, a sprawling place with 3 stories, 11 bedrooms, 9 baths, a ballroom, and 40 rooms total. Harry Houdini showed up in Los Angeles in 1919 to shoot 2 movies for Paramount and rented Walker's guest house at 2435 Laurel Canyon, which sat across the street from the main mansion. Houdini used the pool at 2400 to practice his underwater escape routines, but he never owned the main house or lived there. After Houdini died in 1926, his wife Bess bounced between that guest house and other properties. Then in 1935, after Walker's death, Bess threw a cocktail party for 500 visiting magicians at the Walker Mansion. And after that party, the press started calling it Houdini House. The myth took root and never let go. Fire destroyed the mansion in 1959, and in 1972, a book called This is Hollywood labeled it as Houdini's house without bothering to verify the claim. When the property went up for sale in 1989, Merrill Lynch hired 2 separate title search companies to dig into the history, and neither one found any connection to Houdini. Houdini historian Manny Weltman put it bluntly, Houdini never set foot on those grounds, and anyone who says so is lying. If anyone comes up with proof, I'll eat my magic hat. But the legend refused to die. Someone rebuilt the property as an event venue they naturally called Houdini House. And people report seeing a ghostly man wandering around. Producer Rick Rubin owned a recording studio there during the 70s and 80s, and bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Marilyn Manson, and Slipknot all reported weird experiences. Photographic anomalies, sudden temperature drops, the feeling of invisible hands touching them. If there's a ghost at 2400 Laurel Canyon, it's not Harry Houdini. The ghost is the lie itself, a Hollywood legend that keeps coming back no matter how many times someone kills it with facts. Joan Crawford's House of Horrors. Joan Crawford paid $57,000 in 1929 for a house at 426 North Bristol Avenue in Brentwood, buying it with her first husband Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and nicknamed the place El Dojo, which blended both their names. The Mediterranean-style house came with 9 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and 8,100 square feet. Crawford gutted the place immediately and converted it to New England style, then remodeled it again when she divorced Fairbanks in 1933. Each divorce that followed triggered another remodel, like she was trying to erase the previous version of herself. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress in 1946 for Mildred Pierce, but stayed home claiming the flu and had the press come photograph her accepting the Oscar in bed. But something was off about that house. People noticed Crawford's personality shifted dramatically when she was home compared to when she was away filming, and the wall behind her bed kept catching fire for reasons nobody could explain. Crawford married Pepsi-Cola CEO Alfred Steele in 1955, and they moved to New York the following year. Steele's death in 1959 left Crawford buried in debt, forcing her to sell the Bristol Avenue property. Joan Crawford died in 1977, and that's when the reports started pouring in. People saw Crawford's ghost playing billiards with an unknown male specter dressed in 30s clothing. That same wall behind where her bed used to be kept catching fire spontaneously into the mid-80s. Crying sounds came from inside the walls, and residents found themselves plagued with depression, alcoholism, addiction, and mental health problems that seemed to come with the property. Crawford's daughter Christina published Mommy Dearest in 1978, laying out alleged abuse that happened in that house, and the 1981 film version with Faye Dunaway turned the property into a landmark of horror. Christina talked about seeing frightening figures when she was a child, and years later, she said owners confirmed the paranormal activity kept happening. She believed the house harbored negative spirits that fed Joan's cruelty, and she put it this way: "It would not surprise me in the least if the haunting spirit that is in the house is Crawford. She was capable of real evil." Owner after owner called in exorcists and ghost hunters. The running theory was that vindictive spirits had poisoned the property even before Crawford moved in. New owners launched a massive remodeling project in 2003, expanding the house to 11,558 square feet. Heavy renovations and thick foliage now hide it from the street, and for the last 20 years, nobody has reported any fires or phantoms. Maybe the renovations broke whatever curse hung over the place. Maybe the spirits finally moved on. Or maybe Joan Crawford got exactly what she wanted, to be left alone in the house she could never escape, even in death. Pickfair, Falcon Lair, the so-called Houdini Mansion, and Joan Crawford's Bristol Avenue house tell us something fundamental about Hollywood. This is a town built on illusion, where the line between performance and reality blurs even after death. Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks built an image of perfection at Pickfair, and when that image cracked, when the ghosts got too real or the termites too expensive, demolishing everything felt easier than dealing with what actually lurked there. Rudolph Valentino achieved more fame in death than he ever had while living, and his mansion turned into a shrine to eternal youth that never got the chance to age. The Houdini Mansion proves Hollywood would rather embrace a compelling lie than settle for a boring truth. Joan Crawford's house reminds us the real horror sometimes has nothing to do with the supernatural and everything to do with what people inflict on each other behind closed doors. Some of these mansions still stand, others came down decades ago, but their stories keep circulating because they're about more than ghosts. They're about Hollywood's golden age, about the flesh and blood people behind those larger-than-life personas, about lives that ended but somehow never quite finished. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, these mansions are haunted. If not by spirits, then by history, by memory, by the dreams and nightmares of the people who built Hollywood into what it became. And in this town, that might be the most powerful haunting of all.